After Resident Evil 7 and Village, the rules changed. Monsters stopped being accidents, cities stopped collapsing, and control quietly replaced chaos. The horror is no longer loud, it's institutional. This video does not retell the entire Resident Evil timeline. I've already covered that in full, from the origins of Umbrella to the modern era, and I'll leave that video linked in the description if you want the complete history. This breakdown starts later, after Village, focusing on where the world actually stands now, which organizations hold power, and where the key characters are positioned as the next chapter begins. We're looking at where Leon, Jill, Chris, and the others exist in the world now. This is everything you need to understand before Resident Evil 9. If you enjoy this breakdown, leave a like, it genuinely helps more than you think. And let me know in the comments what Resident Evil lore you want covered next. While the tactical demolition of the mountain stronghold in Romania felt like a victory for Chris Redfield and his Houndwolf squad, the broader strategic fallout revealed a far more grim reality. Vaporizing the fungal mass was a hollow gesture, because the organism had already served its purpose as a biological repository. For centuries, this massive subterranean network acted as a natural hard drive, archiving the genetic code and neural imprints of every life form it absorbed. Even though the physical root is now ash, the connections and specific factions within the BSAA had already exfiltrated the most vital genomic intelligence. These groups did not need the living organism to survive, when they already held the digitized remains and archived sequences required to replicate its power. The conclusion of the mission in Romania signaled the end of the mold as a localized threat, but it simultaneously accelerated a new era of information-based bioterrorism. We have moved past the age where villains simply wanted to create shambling monsters. The current goal is the archiving and editing of human consciousness itself. The real tragedy of the incident was not the body count, but the fact that the genetic blueprints harvested there became the most valuable currency on the global black market. In this new landscape, containment is a secondary concern, because the blueprints for immortality have already been decentralized and encrypted across private servers. This shift defines the world as we move toward the next chapter of the timeline. The discovery that human identity can be digitized and stored within a fungal medium has fundamentally changed the objectives of the bio-industrial complex. The individual is no longer a finite entity. With enough genomic intelligence, a person can be reconstructed, manipulated, or even synthesized as a biological tool. Since the BSAA secured the remaining samples, Miranda's experiment lives on in sterile, high-tech environments, stripped of its folklore and repurposed for corporate dominance. We are seeing the final erasure of the line between life and property. The aftermath of the operation also proves that lead and fire are increasingly obsolete against modern threats. While the old guard continues to target physical laboratories, the enemy has migrated into the cloud. You cannot neutralize a genomic sequence with a rocket launcher, nor can you sanitize an aerosolized data stream. The mission in Romania was the definitive proof that biological threats have evolved beyond conventional military reach. The world is now navigating a reality where the contagion is made of memory, and the only effective quarantine is a permanent state of institutional surveillance. The environmental fallout in Eastern Europe suggests that the pathogen has established a permanent foothold in the natural world. Even with the primary root destroyed, the soil remains saturated with spores that carry the vestigial memories of the parasite. The BSAA's refusal to fully evacuate or sanitize the region implies they are treating the site as a long-term observational study. They are monitoring the Earth to see if the network can reboot itself from a single spore, treating a global hazard as a proprietary asset. The mission was not the end of a nightmare. It was the birth of a more subtle, systemic form of horror. The strategic failure of the operation also underscores a massive shift in bioweaponry. In the early days of Umbrella, the goal was mass destruction through viral spread. Today, the focus is on a refined, archived version of humanity. The elite no longer fear death when they can purchase a digital insurance policy based on fungal memory. This is the dark heritage of the village. It proved that the wealthy can buy a form of eternity, provided they have the right syndicate to manage their digital remains. The world is being divided between those who are finite and those who are archived. Finally, the incident demonstrated that the era of laboratory containment is dead. In the 90s, a lab was a building with walls that could be collapsed. In 2021, the lab is an entire ecosystem, a religious cult, and a digital network spanning miles. This complexity has outpaced the ability of any government to provide true safety. The world after Romania is defined by this loss of control, leaving us in a landscape where the shadows of the past continue to dictate global policy. The fire in the mountains was a desperate, late attempt to stop a threat that had already gone digital. When the C virus tore through major cities in 2013, the world could no longer ignore the reality of biological warfare. The corporate secrecy that defined the Umbrella years was permanently shattered as urban centers like Lanxiang were destroyed on live television. However, the anticipated global uprising against the bioweapons industry never occurred. Instead, 15 years of managed disasters and localized outbreaks have created a state of outbreak fatigue. The average citizen has been conditioned to view these incidents not as corporate crimes, but as unavoidable natural disasters, much like a severe hurricane or a seasonal plague. This psychological desensitization was a calculated move by the BSAA and their pharmaceutical backers. By rebranding bioterrorism as a force of nature, they ensured that the public remained passive rather than revolutionary. The sharp terror of the Raccoon City era has been replaced by a weary, collective resignation. People no longer take to the streets to protest the existence of these pathogens. They simply check the daily hazard reports before commuting to work. This new normal allows corporations to hide their research behind emergency response protocols, turning every new tragedy into a fresh opportunity for profit. The public has not revolted because the horror has been successfully sanitized for their consumption. Media outlets, often funded by the same companies producing the vaccines, frame every incident as a tragic anomaly that was skillfully managed by the brave operatives of the BSAA. This creates a false sense of security, where the populace believes the experts are in control, even when those experts are the ones facilitating the problem. Normalization is the ultimate defensive wall for the industry. If the sight of a mutated creature no longer shocks the conscience, there is no political will to dismantle the system that created it. This culture of acceptance is further reinforced through mandatory training and drills in urban centers. Children are taught to identify early symptoms of infection before they are even taught the history of the companies responsible for the plague. This generational indoctrination ensures that the citizens of the future will view biological threats as a permanent, natural part of their existence. The safety promised by the state is actually a permanent state of low-level infection and constant surveillance, a trade-off that most people are now willing to make to maintain a semblance of their daily routine. Outbreak fatigue also serves to silence survivors and whistleblowers. When veterans like Chris Redfield or Leon Kennedy attempt to expose a new conspiracy, their warnings are often drowned out by a public that is already exhausted by the sheer volume of biological news. The truth is no longer a catalyst for change, because the truth is too exhausting to confront. The establishment has flooded the information stream with managed disasters, ensuring that no single event ever gains the traction needed to trigger a systemic overhaul. The public knows the monsters are real, but they have been convinced they are a necessary part of the security landscape. Furthermore, the economic dependence of modern cities on biodefense grants and medical manufacturing makes systemic change nearly impossible. Entire local economies are built on the manufacture of the cure for the very strains the companies are secretly refining. This circular economy of terror and treatment is the foundational structure of the world. The people have not changed anything because they cannot afford to. Stopping the industry would trigger an economic collapse as devastating as any virus. The pathogen is no longer just in the blood. It is in the bank accounts of the working class. Ultimately, the transparency of the post-Resident Evil 6 era was a trap. By allowing the public to see a sanitized version of the truth, the global powers ensured that the real secrets remained even better hidden. The public is focused on the shambling zombies in the streets, and while the institutional evil is busy perfecting the next generation of obedience-based bioweapons in clean, modern labs. The world is perfectly infected because the people have learned to live with the rot. The normalization of the nightmare is the final victory of the pharmaceutical myth, proving that you do not need to hide the monster if you can convince everyone it is just part of the family. Formed in the mid-2000s as a non-governmental organization, the BSAA was intended to fill the massive power vacuum left by the total collapse of the Umbrella Corporation. Its mandate was clear, transparent, and noble: to act as the world's police force for biological threats and to ensure that the horrors of Raccoon City were never repeated on any soil. The legitimacy of the alliance came from two primary sources that the world desperately needed at the time: the massive financial backing of the Global Pharmaceutical Federation and the unparalleled moral authority of its founding members. Heroes like Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine gave the organization a face of absolute integrity. During its early years, the alliance acted as a genuine symbol of hope for a traumatized global population. It provided a centralized, professional response to viral leaks and black market bioweapon trades that had been spiraling out of control since the 1998 incident. The world trusted the alliance because it was led by the very people who had looked into the abyss of the Spencer Mansion and survived the fires of Raccoon City. This moral security was a crucial component of the era, allowing the public to believe that the good guys finally had the resources, the funding, and the tactical superiority to win the war. The organization replaced Umbrella not just industrially, but morally. While Umbrella was a shadowy cabal of scientists and aristocrats, the alliance was presented as a transparent, UN-sanctioned force for good. This moral branding allowed the organization to gain access to sovereign nations and private corporate files that were previously off limits. They were the saviors of the genome, a group that promised to use science to protect life rather than destroy it. This trust was the Alliance's greatest asset, allowing them to build a global military infrastructure that eventually eclipsed the power of many national armies. However, the seeds of current corruption were present from the very beginning. by relying on funding from the Global Pharmaceutical Federation, which represented the same group of companies that produced the viruses the Alliance was supposed to regulate. The organization was born with a fundamental conflict of interest. The Alliance was tasked with policing its own benefactors. This quiet corruption was initially masked by the high-profile successes of its field agents, but beneath the surface, the organization was slowly being integrated into the global bio-industrial complex. The reliance of the Alliance on the hero narrative was also a strategic choice by its corporate founders. They knew that as long as Chris Redfield was wearing the uniform, the public would not look too closely at the fine print of the charter. The heroes provided a moral shield for the organization's darker logistical expansions. While Chris was in the field fighting Magini or Javo, the executive boards were being filled with corporate lobbyists and state actors who viewed the virus as a strategic asset rather than a biological plague. By the mid-2010s, the original purpose of the Alliance had been almost entirely subverted. The assessment part of their mandate had been replaced by management. They were no longer trying to eradicate the T virus. They were trying to ensure that its use remained orderly and deniable. The transparency of the early years was replaced by a bureaucracy of silence. The Alliance was now a global biopower that possessed its own air force, its own research black sites, and its own tactical doctrine that prioritized institutional survival over human life. The original purpose of the Alliance was the bait in a 30-year trap. They gave the world a reason to trust the pharmaceutical industry again, providing the safe haven that allowed the next generation of bioweapons to be incubated. The tragedy of the Alliance is that its founders truly believed they were doing the right thing, unaware that their bravery was being used as a tactical calibration tool for the very industry they hated. The organization did not replace Umbrella. It evolved Umbrella into a form that was legally and socially untouchable. The definitive moment the Alliance crossed the line occurred during the events of the Village incident in 2021, an event that shattered the moral shield of the organization forever. When Chris Redfield reached the final layers of the conflict in Romania, he discovered a truth that fundamentally changed the trajectory of the entire series. The tactical teams deployed by the Alliance to contain the situation were not human soldiers in gas masks, but specialized bioorganic weapons. These were humanoid bio-soldiers, engineered in the Alliance's own secret laboratories. This was the moment the organization officially became the very monster it was created to hunt. Chris Redfield's discovery was a devastating betrayal of everything he had fought for since 1998. He realized that the Alliance had not just been mismanaging funds or engaging in cover-ups. They had crossed the final ethical Rubicon by creating their own proprietary line of biological soldiers. These creatures were designed to be perfectly obedient, tireless, and lethal, utilizing a combination of the T virus and mold technology to create a soldier that was biologically incapable of dissent or failure. The organization had successfully industrialized the combat data protocol that Wesker had pioneered. The use of bio-soldiers is the final proof that the Alliance has inherited the cold, clinical soul of the Umbrella Corporation. They have adopted the fundamental belief that the human genome is a tool to be edited and weaponized for the sake of global security. This is the point where the Alliance stopped being a defensive organization and became an offensive biopower. By using monsters to fight monsters, they have created a self-sustaining cycle of biological war that requires their permanent intervention. They are the firefighters who are also arsonists. This line was crossed because the Alliance leadership realized that human soldiers were an operational liability in the age of high-level biocombat. Human beings could be infected. They could suffer from psychological trauma, and most importantly, they could testify in international courts. The organic bio-soldiers offered a clinical, deniable alternative. If a bio-soldier is lost in the field, there is no family to notify and no body to return. They are disposable tactical assets, a phrase that captures the absolute dehumanization that now governs the Alliance's doctrine. The crossing of this line also explains why the Alliance has been so aggressive in silencing the Raccoon City survivors in recent years. People like Chris and Jill are a threat to this new status quo because they still remember what the line actually looked like. The shift toward bio-soldiers is an attempt to phase out the old guard and replace them with a force that is biologically programmed to follow orders without question. The Alliance has realized that the only thing more dangerous than a virus is a hero with a moral compass. The Village ending was the grand reveal of the new direction of the series. It showed that the villain is no longer a man in a lab coat, but the very system we trusted to save us. The Alliance has become a global parasite, using the UN flag to protect its own research into obedience-based bioweapons. Chris Redfield's decision to head toward the BSAA Europe headquarters is the start of a revolution, but he is fighting an organization that has already replaced its human heart with a viral engine. Finally, the crossing of the line signifies the death of the outbreak era. The Alliance does not need a leak to change the world. They just need to deploy their peacekeeping units. The horror of the future is not a chaotic spread of a pathogen, but the orderly, efficient deployment of engineered soldiers in every major city. The BSAA problem is the central theme leading into Resident Evil 9. It is the story of a world where the heroes are the only ones left who are not part of the corporate hive mind. The most terrifying reality of the modern era is that the Alliance has successfully achieved a state of being too big to fail. Unlike the original Umbrella Corporation, which was a private entity that could eventually be bankrupted and liquidated, the BSAA is a UN-sanctioned organization with absolute diplomatic immunity. So they are integrated into the global security infrastructure and the municipal defense of almost every major nation on Earth. To dismantle the Alliance today would be to leave the world completely defenseless against the thousands of black market viruses and rogue syndicates that the organization currently regulates. This diplomatic immunity ensures that the Alliance is effectively above the law. Even when evidence of their organic bio-soldier program is presented, the organization can simply hide behind classified defense protocols and national security mandates. They have successfully subverted the legal systems of the world by becoming the only experts capable of handling a level 5 biological outbreak. If a government attempts to investigate an Alliance lab, the organization can simply withdraw its protection, leaving that nation vulnerable. It is a state of managed dependency that has turned the world's leaders into accomplices. The authority of the organization is also rooted in the total normalization of bioterrorism, because they are the ones who define what a biohazard is and what a proper response looks like. They are the ones who control the narrative of every incident. They can declare any city or any corporation a hot zone and legally seize control of its infrastructure, turning a municipal disaster into a private military operation for data harvesting. This level of power is unprecedented in human history. The Alliance has achieved a state of global bio-sovereignty. The organization's infrastructure is also decentralized and industrial. They possess their own air force, their own satellite network, and their own subterranean logistics hubs that bypass national borders. If the UN were to officially revoke their charter, the alliance would simply transition into a massive, independent private military company that already possesses the most advanced weapons on the planet. They are not just a military force. They are a biological state with no territory and no accountability. This makes them a ghost empire, an entity that can be everywhere and nowhere at once. The funding of the alliance is tied to the Global Pharmaceutical Council, a group of companies that are too economically vital to be touched. To attack the alliance's funding is to attack the global economy. This circular economy of terror and treatment ensures that the organization is protected by the very people who profit from the plague. The BSAA problem is that the organization is the ultimate fulfillment of Oswald Spencer's vision, a world ruled by a self-sustaining biological elite that is hidden behind a mask of institutional legitimacy. For the survivors like Chris Redfield, the battle against the Alliance is a war against the very foundation of the modern world. To bring down the organization is to risk a global biological collapse. This is the institutional evil that defines the series leading into Resident Evil 9, a system that uses the threat of total destruction to protect its own internal rot. The organization inherits the legacy of the Shadow, proving that the Umbrella Way was not just a corporate strategy, but a blueprint for a global biopower that can never be truly dismantled. The Alliance cannot be stopped because they have integrated themselves into the biology of society. They are in the water, the medicine, and the military doctrine of every nation. They are the new normal. To fight them is to be labeled a bioterrorist by the very people who created the term. Chris Redfield is heading to Europe not to lead an army, but to commit an act of internal revolution against an organization that has already replaced its human soul with a viral engine. The BSAA is the final boss of the Resident Evil timeline. In the world leading directly into Resident Evil 9, the control of bioweapons has undergone a radical and terrifying decentralization. The era of a single mastermind in a mansion like Oswald Spencer or Albert Wesker is over. Power has been fractured into a triad of control consisting of national militaries, private contractors, and religious cults. This decentralization makes the threat far more difficult to target and nearly impossible to eradicate. There is no longer a main villain or a central headquarters to destroy. Instead, the villain is the market itself. As long as there is a global demand for immortality or untraceable assassination, someone will supply the virus. The national militaries of the world have successfully integrated bioweapon research into their standard biodefense programs, creating a world where every superpower has its own secret version of the T virus or the G virus. They view these pathogens as strategic assets, much like nuclear weapons, used to maintain a global balance of terror. These governments do not want to rule the world as gods. They want to use biological weapons as tactical equalizers in their proxy wars. This state use of bioweapons is the final normalization of the nightmare. The virus is no longer a rogue project. It is a national asset protected by official secrecy acts. The second pillar of power is the private contractors and crime syndicates, like the Connections or the remains of Tricell. These groups provide the technical expertise, the illegal research, and the deniability that the national militaries require. They operate in the shadow market, moving samples through the vertical tunnels and secret bioports that Umbrella originally built. These contractors are the viral architects of the modern era, selling their monsters to the highest bidder without any ideological goal other than pure profit. They do not care about forced evolution. They care about the subscription model of bioweapon maintenance and vaccine supply. The third and most unpredictable pillar is the religious cults, such as the Los Iluminados or Mother Miranda's Four Houses. These groups provide the evolutionary vision and the fanaticism that justifies the use of these pathogens on a massive scale. They view the virus or the parasite as a gift from a divine source, a way to purify the human race and achieve a higher state of being through biological transcendence. This religious fervor makes them extremely dangerous, as they are not motivated by money or political power, but by a delusional belief in a new world order. When these cults gain access to corporate technology, they create a biotheocracy. This decentralization means that the complete timeline has reached its most volatile and uncontrollable phase. The bioweapon is now a commodity of the masses, a technology that has escaped the elite laboratories and entered the global public consciousness. The world is a patchwork of bio-fiefdoms, each ruled by the group with the most lethal pathogen or the most effective control parasite. This is the reality that Leon Kennedy and Chris Redfield must face every day. They are no longer fighting a specific company. They are fighting a global culture of biological warfare. The market is the new umbrella. Furthermore, the control of bioweapons has moved into the data sector. Power is no longer held by the person with the vial, but by the person with the genomic sequence. As we saw in Romania, the subterranean organism was just a physical vessel for centuries of archived data. The person who owns the server owns the future of human evolution. The triad of control, consisting of militaries, corporations, and cults, is racing to secure this memory data to build the next generation of obedience-based bioweapons. The war is no longer about a physical outbreak. It is about the biological ownership of the human race's collective history. Ultimately, who holds power now is anyone with the resources to hack the genome. The BSAA problem is just one part of this larger ecosystem of control. The world leading into Resident Evil 9 is a world where the monsters are the products and the consumers are the victims. The decentralization of power has created a world that is perfectly infected, because the rot is no longer coming from one source. It is the foundation of the entire global system. Spencer's dream of a new world has been realized. But it is not a world of gods. It is a world of industrialized agony, where the villain is the very air we breathe. While the control of bioweapons has decentralized, two primary organizations continue to dominate the biological landscape and drive the narrative of the modern era: the Connections and Blue Umbrella. The Connections is a high-level international crime syndicate that specializes in humanoid bioweapons and psychological control. They were the secret architects of the E-Series mold and the creators of the Valentine asset. Their goal is to achieve total social destabilization through the use of fungal hive minds and parasitic neural links. They are the shadow players who operate in the blackest markets, moving between the corporate and criminal worlds with total high-tech impunity. The Connections are significant because they represent the shift from viral destruction to psychological domination. They are not interested in creating shambling zombies. They want to create living nodes that can control the minds of an entire population. They are the ghost of Umbrella's ambition, utilizing the stolen research of the 1990s to create a new kind of clean biological warfare. Their ability to remain hidden while influencing global events is a testament to the institutional decay of the modern world. They are the invisible syndicate that ensures the bioweapons market remains a thriving, self-sustaining engine of chaos. The second organization that still matters is Blue Umbrella, the repentant corporate entity that claims to be composed of former Umbrella employees seeking to atone for the company's past crimes. They act as a specialized tactical and research wing for the United States government and the DSO. However, the files show that this redemption narrative is a total and calculated facade. Blue Umbrella is essentially a state-controlled laboratory that uses remediation and cleaning as legal loopholes to continue experimenting on the T virus and its derivatives. They are the sanitized successors to Spencer's vision, using the badge of federal authority to hide their research. Blue Umbrella's redemption is a strategic tool for the United States government. By branding their bioweapon research as anti-bioterrorism support, they can bypass international treaties and public scrutiny. They provide the high-tech gear and the antiviral support for agents like Leon Kennedy. But they do so while archiving every piece of combat data and every viral sample he produces in the field. They are the corporate janitors who ensure that the government remains the most powerful player in the biological arms race. By pretending to be the good guys, they have secured a level of access and public trust that the original Umbrella could only dream of. The failure of the redemption narrative is a central theme of the current world state. You cannot clean the Umbrella legacy. You can only repurpose its lethality. Blue Umbrella's very existence is an insult to the victims of Raccoon City. They are the physical manifestation of the institutional denial that allows the bioweapons industry to thrive. They prove that in the post-2013 world, the cure is just another version of the disease, manufactured by the same people for the same reasons. The blue logo is not a sign of hope. It is a sign that the umbrella of deception has successfully rebranded itself for a new generation. These two organizations represent the dual nature of the modern threat, the invisible syndicate and the transparent establishment. They are the twin pillars of the bio-industrial complex. Together, they ensure that biological weapons remain a permanent, profitable part of the global economy. They work in a state of violent cooperation, where the connections create the chaos, and Blue Umbrella provides the solution. It is a circular economy of managed disasters that ensures the market for bioweapons never hits a downturn. This is the reality leading into Resident Evil 9, a world where the organizations that matter have turned the apocalypse into a business model. These organizations still matter because they hold the keys to the future. They are the ones who are currently fighting over the memory data of the subterranean organism and the G virus variants. They represent the institutionalization of the nightmare, proving that the biological war is no longer fought in the streets, but in the courtrooms and the patent offices of the world. The old guard survivors are caught in the middle of these two titans, realizing that no matter who wins, humanity loses. The redemption of Umbrella is the final, most terrifying lie of the complete timeline, ensuring that the fire of Raccoon City will never truly go out. Operating as a rogue element within the global security landscape, Chris Redfield has reached a definitive breaking point with the military-industrial complex he helped stabilize. Following the events in Romania, he has effectively abandoned the standard chain of command to lead his independent Hound Wolf squad on a direct collision course with the European headquarters of the biodefense apparatus. His narrative is no longer that of a soldier following orders, but of a veteran conducting an internal revolution against a system that has turned the human genome into a product line. He is the old soldier who has finally realized that for 20 years, his bravery was the primary marketing tool for the very industry he intended to dismantle. Years of front-line combat against viral and fungal threats have left Chris in a state of deep psychological isolation. He carries the weight of every teammate lost from the Arklay Mountains to the Adonian Civil War, and that burden of responsibility has transformed into a cold, focused fury. Unlike his early days in the STARS unit, Chris is no longer interested in rescuing the day through authorized channels. He understands that the UN force he once trusted is now a manufacturing hub for the next generation of organic assets. His current path is defined by a desperate need for accountability, even if it means burning down the institutions that gave his life purpose. The guilt Chris feels is not just for the lives lost, but for his own complicity in the rise of the current global society. By acting as the moral face of the biodefense apparatus, he provided the legitimacy that allowed the market for genetic weapons to normalize. He has realized that every monster he killed provided the genomic intelligence necessary to build a more efficient, obedient version of that same creature. This realization has turned him into a whistleblower with the tactical skills of an elite commando. He is not just looking for a specific villain, he is looking to dismantle the foundational logic of the pharmaceutical empire, making him the most dangerous man alive in the eyes of his former employers. Despite his rogue status, Chris remains the primary focus of the international community. The powers that be cannot simply liquidate him, because he is a living legend whose death would trigger the very public uprising they seek to avoid. This creates a tense, organic stalemate. Chris is moving through the shadows of Europe, gathering the evidence needed to expose the biosoldier program, while the establishment waits for him to make a tactical error. He is a man with no home and no rank, driven by the singular goal of ensuring that the final bill for 30 years of genetic warfare is finally paid in full. Moving forward, Chris represents the final bridge between the old world of heroism and the new world of institutional rot. He is the only character who has seen the entire evolution of the contagion, from the first mansion leak to the highly managed outbreaks of the present day. This deep history makes him the ultimate threat to the status quo. He knows where the bodies are buried because he was often the one who put them there. His story in the next chapter will likely be the final stand of a man who refuses to let the truth be sanitized by a corporate press release. Every action he takes now is a calculated strike against the infrastructure of the biodefense apparatus. He is targeting their supply lines, their research nodes, and their political backers, utilizing the same black market networks that the connections once used. This role as a vigilante whistleblower has stripped away the last of his idealism, leaving only a grim determination to finish the war. He started in 1998. He is the enforcer who has finally turned his guns on the people who signed his paychecks, and global society is watching to see if he can survive the inevitable retaliation. His relationship with the rest of the original survivors has become strained by his radicalization. While Leon and Jill still operate within the system to some degree, Chris has completely exited the grid. He views their continued service as a form of tragic denial, a belief that the system can still be fixed from within. This ideological rift is a core theme of the current era. Chris is the only one willing to admit that the entire structure is infected beyond repair, and his willingness to act on that belief makes him a tragic, isolated figure in the fight for humanity's future. Concluding his current arc, Chris stands as the personification of the series' shift from horror to consequence. He is no longer fighting a monster. He is fighting a world that has decided the monster is a necessary part of the economy. His mission to Europe is a suicide run designed to force a global reckoning. Whether he succeeds or fails, he has already changed the rules of the game. He has proven that even the most loyal soldier has a limit, and once that limit is reached, the very organizations that built him are no longer safe. Operating in the deepest shadows of the federal apparatus, Leon Kennedy remains the premier asset for the DSO. He is the cleaner that the executive branch sends in when a contagion is too sensitive for the public to witness, or when a corporate conspiracy threatens national stability. While many of his peers have transitioned into administrative roles or retired into the private sector, Leon is still active because he is effectively blackmailed by his own history. He possesses a level of genomic intelligence and classified experience that makes him too dangerous to be allowed back into civilian life. He is a living, breathing, classified document that the state refuses to archive. The career of this former rookie cop is a testament to the tragedy of the survivor. Leon hasn't retired because he knows that his unique skill set is the only thing standing between a localized leak and a global society on the brink of collapse. His idealism from the Raccoon City era has been replaced by a weary, professional cynicism. He understands that the government he serves is often just as corrupt as the syndicates he hunts, but he continues the work because the alternative is total organic chaos. He is a man who has seen the world end multiple times, and that knowledge has made him a permanent ghost within the system. Leon's utility to the DSO is rooted in his ability to maintain a moral anchor in a world of grey morality. Even when he is forced to work with groups like Blue Umbrella, he maintains a tactical distance that ensures the mission remains focused on human survival rather than corporate profit. However, this service comes at a massive personal cost. He is a man without a personal life, moving from one biohazard zone to the next with the cold efficiency of a machine. The state keeps him on a short leash, utilizing his bond with other survivors to ensure his continued compliance. He is the ultimate tool of the established order. His longevity as an operative is also a result of his biological resilience. Having survived multiple exposures to various strains of the contagion, Leon's immune system is a valuable asset in its own right. The government monitors his health with the same clinical intensity they use for their experimental bio-soldiers. This turns Leon into a literal prisoner of his own biology. He cannot leave the service because his body is a repository of viral data that the state cannot risk falling into the hands of a rival power. He is the most protected and the most exploited man in the federal government. The psychological toll on Leon is evident in his detached, almost ghostly demeanor. He has become a man who exists only for the mission, a spectral figure who appears in the middle of a disaster and vanishes before the media can arrive. This lack of agency is the central theme of his current arc. While Chris has chosen to revolt, Leon has chosen to endure, believing that he can do more good by managing the damage from within the system. This decision has cost him his identity, leaving him as nothing more than a lethal instrument of the DSO's will. As global society becomes more desensitized to biological threats, Leon's role becomes even more vital and more invisible. He is the one who handles the outbreaks that the public never hears about, the silent wars fought in the basements of pharmaceutical skyscrapers. He is the guardian of the secrets that allow humanity to maintain its facade of normalcy. This role as a ghost prevents him from ever achieving the closure he sought in 1998. He is forever trapped in the aftermath of Raccoon City, fighting a war that has no end and no victory. His relationship with Ada Wong continues to be the only thing that connects him to a world outside of his federal handlers. She represents the freedom he can never have, a freelance existence that is not bound by the same institutional chains. Yet, even this connection is manipulated by his employers, who view his link to Ada as another tactical variable to be exploited. Leon is a man who is surrounded by people but fundamentally alone, a ghost haunting the corridors of power in a desperate attempt to find a meaning in the slaughter. To summarize his current status, Leon Kennedy is the embodiment of the state's refusal to let the past go. He is a remnant of a more innocent time, repurposed into a weapon for a more cynical era. His story leading into the next chapter is one of professional survival. He is the ghost who knows the truth, the man who carries the weight of the dead on his shoulders, while he tries to save the living from the very people who sign his paychecks. He is the government's ghost, and he is running out of time. Following a prolonged period of medical rehabilitation and psychological screening, Jill Valentine has officially returned to active duty. Her absence from the front line was a tactical necessity after the trauma of the African mission in 2009, where she was subjected to years of chemical and biological manipulation by Albert Wesker. During that time, she was transformed into a biological resource, her body used to stabilize various viral strains through a state of permanent, drug-induced obedience. This history makes her the missing variable in the current world state. She is the only survivor who understands the internal hell of being a controlled asset, making her the perfect counter to the new bio-soldier program. Jill's return to the field is not just a military deployment. It is an act of reclaiming her own agency. She has spent the last decade fighting to erase the influence of the contagion from her own mind and blood. This journey has given her a unique perspective on the loss of free will, a theme that is becoming increasingly relevant as the biodefense apparatus moves toward obedience-based weaponry. Unlike Chris, who fights the organization from the outside, or Leon, who manages it from the inside, Jill represents the internal resistance. She is the living proof that a human spirit can survive the total colonization of its biology. Her presence in the recent DSO and BSAA operations has been a source of significant tension within the international community. Many in the leadership view her as a liability, fearing that her past trauma could be exploited or that her unique physiology might still hold dormant viral sequences. Jill is aware of this scrutiny and uses it as a tactical advantage. She operates with a level of precision and coldness that unnerves her handlers. A woman who has looked into the heart of the corporate machine and survived. She is no longer just a STARS officer. She is a specialist in the psychology of the reanimated. The importance of Jill's return cannot be overstated for the morale of the remaining survivors. She is the heart of the original group, the one who has suffered the most personal violation and yet remains committed to the fight for humanity. Her story is one of recovery and defiance. In a world where the establishment wants to turn every citizen into a data point, Jill stands as a reminder that the individual cannot be fully quantified or controlled. She is the missing variable that the corporate architects failed to account for in their long-term plans for global society. Her current status as of the most recent missions suggests she is acting as a mentor and a tactical advisor for a new generation of operatives. She is teaching them how to maintain their humanity in a conflict that is designed to strip it away. This role as a teacher is her way of ensuring that her trauma serves a purpose beyond corporate research. She is building a legacy of resistance, preparing the next guard for a war that will be fought as much in the mind as in the streets. Jill is the steady hand in a world that is spinning out of control. Despite her return to duty, Jill remains haunted by the years she lost. The gap in her history is a void that she is trying to fill with action. She is driven by a need to destroy the technology that Wesker used to enslave her, a quest that brings her into direct conflict with the current masters of the biodefense apparatus. She knows that the same gas and neural links that were used on her are being refined for mass production. This makes her mission deeply personal. She is not just fighting for a safer world. She is fighting to ensure that no one else ever has to experience the silent agony of being a prisoner in their own flesh. Her relationship with Chris remains the anchor of her existence, though his recent radicalization has created a professional distance between them. She understands his fury, but fears that his rage will consume the very people he is trying to protect. Jill is trying to bridge the gap between his revolution and the reality of the global force, acting as the stabilizing influence that prevents a total internal collapse. She is the one who keeps the group together, even as the world around them falls apart. In conclusion, Jill Valentine is the symbol of agency in an era of control. She is the missing variable that could change the outcome of the final reckoning. Her return signifies that the era of being a victim is over. She is a hunter once again, but this time she is hunting the very concept of biological enslavement. Her story leading into the next chapter is the story of a woman who has reclaimed her soul and is ready to take it out on the people who tried to steal it. While her brother and Leon fight the war on a military and federal level, Claire Redfield has dedicated her life to the human rights and humanitarian side of the biological nightmare. As a leader within the NGO known as TerraSave, she represents the voice of the discarded. Her mission is to provide relief and legal support to the communities that have been vaporized or forgotten by the biodefense apparatus. Claire is the only original survivor who has never militarized, a choice that makes her the most grounded and empathic character in the complete timeline. She is the only one still tethered to the normal world, making her a vital link between the heroes and the public. Claire's work with TerraSave focuses on the legal and social aftermath of outbreaks, a battle that is often just as grueling as the physical fight against the infected. She is the one who documents the corporate war crimes and ensures that the survivors receive the medical care and relocation support they deserve. This role has made her a constant thorn in the side of organizations like Blue Umbrella and the BSAA, who would prefer to let the victims fade into statistical obscurity. Claire is the witness who refuses to be silenced, a woman who uses the power of information and empathy to fight the institutional evil of the modern era. Her refusal to join a government or military agency is a strategic choice. By remaining an independent civilian, Claire can speak truths that Chris and Leon cannot. She is not bound by secrecy acts or diplomatic immunity, allowing her to act as a whistleblower for the human cost of the bioweapons industry. This civilian resistance is the heart of the series' moral core. Claire reminds us that the victims are not just data points. They are people with families, histories, and rights. She is the conscience of the survivors, the one who keeps the focus on the people rather than the pathogens. Her relationship with her brother has become increasingly complex as Chris moves further into his rogue, radicalized state. While she understands his anger, she represents the alternative to his scorched earth policy. Claire believes that the only way to truly win the war is to rebuild the society that the viruses have destroyed. This creates a fascinating ideological tension. Chris wants to destroy the system, while Claire wants to save the people the system is failing. She is the stabilizer who ensures that the war against the monsters doesn't turn the heroes into monsters themselves. In recent years, Claire has expanded TerraSave's reach into the legislative halls of global society. She is fighting for stricter regulations on genetic research and more transparent reporting on biological incidents. This move into the political arena is her attempt to fix the problem at its root. She understands that as long as the bioweapons industry is profitable, the outbreaks will continue. By attacking the financial and legal foundations of the companies, she is conducting a silent, civilian revolution that is just as effective as any tactical strike. Claire's story is also one of permanent resilience. Despite being an ordinary civilian, she has survived some of the most horrific biological disasters in history. Her survival is a testament to the power of human will and the importance of having something to fight for beyond mere survival. She fights for the children, the orphans, and the refugees, ensuring that the next generation has a world worth living in. She is the light in a very dark timeline, a character who has maintained her soul in a world that is designed to consume it. She also serves as the primary connection to the younger generation of survivors, such as Sherry Birkin and Moira Burton. She has mentored these women, helping them process their trauma and find their own paths in a world defined by the bioweapons trade. This role as a surrogate mother and mentor ensures that the resistance will continue long after the old guard has fallen. Claire is building a community of survivors who are dedicated to the truth, creating a network of civilian oversight that the establishment cannot easily infiltrate or control. To summarize, Claire Redfield is the human heart of the resistance. She is the one who ensures that the final bill for 30 years of genetic warfare includes the names of the victims. Her story leading into the next chapter is the story of the civilian fight for a future that is not defined by the laboratory. She is the resistance in its purest form, a woman who fights with empathy and evidence in a world that is addicted to violence and viruses. Wong remains the ultimate neutral party in the global biological arms race, a freelance mercenary who has successfully navigated the shadows of the industry for over 3 decades. Her primary motivation is neither the destruction nor the salvation of global society, but the maintenance of a balance of power. By ensuring that no single nation, organization, or syndicate has a monopoly on the most advanced genetic weapons, she ensures that the world remains in a state of chaotic equilibrium. She is the constant outside the system, the variable that neither the BSAA nor the connections can ever fully quantify or control. Ada's survival is a masterpiece of tactical and social engineering. She operates as a ghost within the shadow market. She's securing viral samples and archived data for the highest bidder, while never aligning herself with any ideological cause. This lack of allegiance is her greatest defense. She is a woman who belongs to no one, a professional who treats the apocalypse as a series of business transactions. This clinical detachment allows her to survive the total collapse of organizations that thought they could own her. She is the one who walks away from the fire with the sample every single time. Her relationship with Leon Kennedy is the only thing that hints at a human core beneath her mercenary exterior. Yet even this bond is used as a tactical tool. She understands that Leon's idealism makes him a predictable variable, and she uses that predictability to achieve her own objectives, while often ensuring his survival in the process. This creates a complex, biological dance between the two, a connection that is defined by the very secrets they are both paid to protect. Ada is the only person who truly understands the depth of Leon's burden. and her presence is the only thing that offers him a glimpse of a world outside his federal chains. Ada represents the privatization of the contagion in its most refined form. She is the personification of the shadow market, the individual who ensures that the technology of the nightmare remains in circulation. By preventing any one side from winning the war, she ensures that the war continues, creating a permanent demand for her specialized services. She is a parasitic entity, in the best sense of the word, thriving in the ruins of the world that the pharmaceutical companies have built. She is the final, most sophisticated evolution of the bioweapons era. Her current status suggests she is targeting the digital remains of the subterranean organism and the G virus variants that have surfaced in the wake of the Village incident. She is the one who understands that the true power is no longer in the vial, but in the server. Her mission is to secure the genomic intelligence that the triad of power is currently fighting over, ensuring that the blueprints for immortality remain decentralized. Ada is the guardian of the market, the woman who ensures that the biological war remains profitable and balanced. Despite her mercenary nature, Ada possesses a code of conduct that sets her apart from the truly nihilistic players in the game. She doesn't seek mass destruction, she seeks mass leverage. This distinction is vital for understanding her role in the complete timeline. She is the one who prevents the fire from burning out of control, not out of a sense of mercy, but out of a sense of self-preservation. She needs the world to survive so that she can continue to operate in its shadows. She is the ultimate professional in a world of fanatical amateurs. Her longevity as an operative is also a result of her mastery of information. She knows the true history of the Umbrella Corporation, the deep secrets of the BSAA, and the true origins of the connections. This knowledge is her ultimate weapon. She doesn't need a viral strain to bring down a corporation. She just needs the right file. This makes her the most dangerous person in the world to the people who hold the power. She is the one who can collapse the entire house of cards with a single leak, and her survival is a testament to her ability to keep that leverage hidden. In conclusion, Ada Wong is the constant outside the system that ensures the system never stops spinning. She is the ghost who walks through walls, the woman who turns the apocalypse into a career. Her story leading into the next chapter is the story of the market's ultimate representative. She is the neutral force that will decide who wins the final reckoning, not by choosing a side, but by choosing the highest bidder. She is Ada Wong, and in a world of monsters and heroes, she is the only one who is truly free. Moving into the next chapter of the saga, the traditional concept of an outbreak has become effectively obsolete. For decades, the series relied on the dramatic tension of a sudden viral leak and the subsequent race to contain a localized catastrophe. However, in the current landscape of global society, the contagion has already achieved a state of permanent integration. The strain is no longer a rogue element that escapes a laboratory. It is a foundational component of the modern security and pharmaceutical infrastructure. Consequently, the next entry in the franchise will likely pivot away from the spectacle of a city falling into chaos and toward the terrifying reality of systemic control. Harvesting the remains of past incidents has allowed the international community to move beyond the fear of a biological accident. The horror of the future is not that the infection is spreading, but that it is being managed with clinical precision. In this world, a localized release of a pathogen is not a failure of containment, but a targeted tactical decision used to suppress a specific population or to erase inconvenient truth. The world has shifted from a battle against a plague to a struggle against a global bureaucracy that utilizes organic assets to maintain its dominance. We are living in a world that is already infected at a structural level, making a traditional outbreak story feel redundant. By focusing on a world that has already adapted to the presence of the pathogen, the narrative can explore the deeper, more subtle implications of the Umbrella legacy. The tension in the next mission will not come from the fear of being bitten, but from the realization that every institution you rely on for safety is built on a foundation of genetic warfare. The contagion is no longer an external monster. It is the silent engine of the modern economy. This shift toward institutional horror allows for a more mature and psychologically complex exploration of the series' themes, moving beyond the survival of the individual and toward the survival of human agency itself. Recent data from the mission in Romania suggests that the global force and its shadow partners are no longer interested in mass reanimation. They have perfected the art of the controlled release, utilizing the genomic intelligence of the megamycete to create localized, stable environments where the host remains conscious and obedient. This means the next chapter will likely take place in a setting where the horror is hidden behind a mask of normalcy. You won't be walking through a city of shambling corpses. You will be walking through a clean, modern facility where every individual has been biologically rewired to follow a corporate hive mind. Furthermore, the desensitization of global society means that a massive outbreak would no longer have the same psychological impact it did in 1998. The public has seen cities burn before, and they have been trained to view it as a manageable tragedy. To truly terrify the modern audience, the story must go smaller and deeper, focusing on the loss of the soul within a perfectly functioning society. The horror of the next game will be found in the details of the everyday, in the realization that your medicine, your food, and your security are all proprietary products of the biodefense apparatus. The legacy of the Winters family and the archival power of the mold have set the stage for this new era of control. Because the blueprints for immortality and memory storage are now in the hands of the establishment, the stakes have moved from physical survival to digital sovereignty. The next entry will likely deal with the battle for the archived sequences of the human race. The mission is no longer to find a cure, but to reclaim the history that the corporations have stolen. It is a fight for the right to be finite in a world that wants to archive you forever. Concluding this thesis, the shift away from a traditional outbreak allows the series to return to its roots in a more sophisticated way. It brings the focus back to the claustrophobia of the mansion, but this time the mansion is the entire global society. The walls are not made of stone and wood, but of genetic code and institutional secrecy. The mission is to find the exit from a world that has been designed as a biological cage. It is a story of consequence rather than escalation, a final reckoning with the reality that the war was lost long ago, and we are just living in the aftermath. Advancing into the modern era of the timeline, the primary conflict has transitioned from a fight against viral chaos to a struggle against total biological control. The early days of the T virus were defined by the unpredictable, shambling hunger of the reanimated, a form of biological anarchy that Umbrella struggled to manage. However, the current objectives of the international community and its shadow partners have evolved. They are no longer interested in the loud, messy destruction of a city. Instead, they are perfecting obedience-based weaponry, creating a new generation of organic assets that look human, act human, and follow tactical commands with absolute clinical precision. Utilizing the research from the Las Plagas and the mold, the architects of the New World Order have developed pathogens that do not destroy the host's mind, but rather replace it with an institutional hive mind. These new enemies are the ultimate surveillance tools. They can occupy a city without the public ever realizing they have been compromised, acting as a silent, biological police force that monitors every thought and action of the population. This shift from chaos to control represents the final victory of the pharmaceutical myth. The monster is no longer an anomaly. It is the enforcer of the state. The psychological horror of this new era is the loss of agency. In the past, you could tell who the monster was because they were rotting or screaming. In the next chapter, the person standing next to you could be a perfectly stable host for a control parasite. Their every word and movement dictated by a server in a BSAA black site. This loss of internal freedom is a more terrifying prospect than physical death. It turns the entire human race into a potential resource for the biodefense apparatus. A world where the only way to stay free is to stay disconnected from the global network. The evolution of these pathogens also means that the tactical landscape has changed for the remaining heroes. You cannot solve the problem of an obedience-based weapon by simply shooting it. These assets are protected by the law and the state, making any action against them a criminal act rather than a heroic rescue. The conflict is now a war of subversion and intelligence, a struggle to find the frequency that controls the hive mind and to shatter the digital chains that bind the host. It is a war for the mind, fought in the streets of a society that believes it is still free. Integrating this new level of control into the gameplay of the next mission will likely involve a heavier focus on stealth and deductive reasoning. The player must navigate a world where the enemies are indistinguishable from the civilians, where a single wrong word can trigger a biological response from the entire neighborhood. This mirrors the surveillance horror that has become a staple of modern life, but with a visceral, biological twist. The camera in the corner is no longer just watching you. It is part of a fungal network that can rewrite your DNA if you are caught. This theme of control versus chaos also highlights the rift between the old guard and the new establishment. Redfield represents the chaotic human element that the system cannot account for. A man who still believes in the messy, unpredictable nature of individual freedom. The alliance he once served has become the champion of order, a force that believes the only way to prevent another raccoon city is to put a biological leash on every citizen. This ideological war will be the heart of the next mission, a struggle to prove that the soul cannot be fully digitized or controlled. Refining these concepts for the next chapter of the saga ensures that the series remains relevant to the modern world. We are living in an era of data mining and neural networks, and Resident Evil is evolving to reflect the biological side of that reality. The horror is no longer a monster in a closet. It is the code in your blood that tells you how to feel and what to think. It is a world where the only thing more dangerous than a virus is a perfectly functioning society that has been designed as a biological prison. The struggle between control and chaos is the final evolution of the Umbrella legacy. Spencer wanted to create a new world of gods, but his successors have created a world of perfect slaves. The mission for Leon and Jill is to find the cracks in this biological wall and to remind global society that being human means being unpredictable. The fight is for the right to be chaotic in a world that is addicted to the silence of the hive mind. It is a requiem for the old world and a rebellion against the new one. Shifting the focus from global spectacles to intimate, institutional settings. The next mission in the saga will likely trade the destruction of cities for the destruction of a specific truth. The horror of the future is found in the clean, modern facilities of the biodefense apparatus, where the atrocities are conducted under bright LED lights and documented on corporate spreadsheets. This smaller scale allows for a more focused and visceral exploration of the individual's struggle against an all-powerful institution. The stakes are no longer just the survival of a town, but the exposure of a truth that could collapse the entire global order. Entering a high-tech laboratory or a sanitized medical center in the modern era reveals a form of evil that is far more disturbing than a mansion full of zombies. The horror comes from the realization that everyone in the building, from the janitor to the lead scientist, is a biological slave to the system. This institutional evil is bloodless and clinical, treating human suffering as a necessary variable in the pursuit of genomic intelligence. By narrowing the scope of the mission, the story can highlight the absolute dehumanization that occurs when a corporation treats the human body as a piece of equipment. The consequences of these smaller missions are actually far greater than the large-scale conflicts of the past. If a city is destroyed, the world moves on. But if a core truth about the Alliance's bio-soldier program or the federal government's complicity is exposed, it could trigger a systemic collapse of the entire international community. The mission is a surgical strike on the foundation of the modern world. The heroes are no longer trying to stop a leak. They are trying to start a revolution by revealing the biological chains that bind every citizen. This focus on institutional horror also allows for a return to the classic survival horror atmosphere, but with a modern twist. The tension is built through environmental storytelling. The memos, the medical charts, and the cold, blue-lit hallways that lead to a final, devastating revelation. The player is a witness to a crime that has been committed by the very people they were taught to trust. This creates a psychological weight that is far more effective than the spectacle of 100 monsters, turning every locked door into a barrier between the hero and the truth. The scale of the next mission also reflects the professional isolation of the remaining survivors. They are no longer leading armies or coordinating global responses. They are operating as ghosts in a world that has turned against them. This smaller, more personal perspective makes every bullet and every decision feel more meaningful. The conflict is not just about survival. It is about the moral anchor of the character in a world that has lost its way. It is a fight to ensure that the final bill for 30 years of genetic warfare is finally paid, one truth at a time. Furthermore, the smaller scale allows for a more detailed exploration of the individual's story. We can see the toll that the war has taken on Leon, Jill, and Chris as they navigate the sterile corridors of their former employers. The horror is reflected in their eyes, in the weariness of their movements, and in the grim determination of their mission. This is the requiem for the characters who have survived the mansion, the city, and the global chaos, only to find that the final enemy is the very system they helped build. The mission's success depends on the hero's ability to maintain their agency within a facility designed to strip it away. They are the human variables in a perfectly engineered environment, the only ones who can still think and act for themselves. This creates a visceral, psychological tension as they move deeper into the heart of the institutional evil. The goal is to find the data that cannot be archived, the human truth that the corporations cannot control. It is a mission of consequence, a final stand for the right to be more than just a genomic sequence. Concluding this arc, The shift toward a smaller scale with bigger consequences is the logical progression of the complete timeline. It brings the series back to the personal, intimate horror that defined its debut, but with the added weight of 30 years of institutional rot. The mission is to find the crack in the wall of the biological state and to pull it down, even if the heroes are buried in the rubble. It is the story of the end of the old guard and the birth of a new, more dangerous world, where the truth is the most lethal weapon of all. With Leon already appearing in the trailers, this section isn't a theory about if he's involved. It's about why he fits the world RE9 is building. In a landscape defined by grey morality and systemic corruption, Leon Kennedy remains the essential moral anchor for the narrative. Despite 30 years of service to a government that has repeatedly betrayed his trust, Leon continues to operate with a battered but intact sense of idealism. He is the audience surrogate, the person who reminds us that even in a world of monsters and corporate janitors, the individual can still choose to be a hero. His role as the government's ghost makes him the perfect lens through which to view the institutional evil of the biodefense apparatus, as he sees the rot from the inside every day. Leon's longevity as an operative is not just a result of his tactical skill, but of his ability to endure the psychological toll of the bioweapons era. He is a man who has lost his city, his identity, and his freedom. Yet he continues the work because he knows that his unique experience is the only thing standing between global society and a total biological collapse. This resilience makes him a hero of consequence rather than spectacle. He is not fighting for a medal or a promotion. He is fighting for the right to live in a world that isn't a laboratory. His Boy Scout idealism is the only thing that prevents him from becoming another cold, clinical instrument of the DSO. His relationship with the other survivors, particularly Claire and Ada, provides the emotional weight that grounds the story in a human reality. Claire represents the civilian world he can never return to, while Ada represents the freedom he can never achieve. Leon is caught between these two poles, moving through the shadows of the federal apparatus in a state of permanent professional isolation. This loneliness makes him a tragic but relatable figure, the man who has given everything for a country that views him as a disposable asset. He is the heart of the resistance within the establishment. Leon also fits this world because his story is one of professional survival. He understands the rules of the game better than anyone else, allowing him to navigate the bureaucracy of silence that protects the pharmaceutical industry. He knows how to find the cracks in the system and how to move through a hot zone without being detected. This makes him the perfect operative for a mission into a high-tech institutional facility. He doesn't need to break down the door. He already has the key. His story in the next chapter will likely be the final struggle to reclaim his own agency from the state that has archived his soul. Furthermore, Leon's immune system and his history of exposure make him a biological anomaly that the establishment cannot ignore. He is the living proof that the human spirit can resist the virus, a fact that makes him a threat to the normalization of the contagion. The government monitors him not just to protect him, but to ensure that his rebellion remains localized and deniable. Leon is aware of this surveillance and uses it as a tactical tool, acting as a double agent within his own organization. He is the ghost in the machine, the human error that the system failed to account for. The next mission will likely force Leon to face the reality that the government he serves is no longer worthy of his loyalty. He will be forced to choose between the safety of the institution and the survival of the truth. This choice is the final test of his moral anchor. If Leon can find a way to act on his idealism in a world that has institutionalized the nightmare, he will prove that the individual is still the most powerful force in the complete timeline. He is the hero we need in a world that has decided heroes are obsolete. Concluding his arc, Leon Kennedy stands as the symbol of endurance. He is the man who refuses to stay dead, the rookie cop who became the conscience of a global empire. His story leading into Resident Evil 9 is the final act of a ghost who is ready to take back his life. Whether he survives or not, Leon's legacy will be the fact that he never stopped trying to save the world, even after the world had already decided it was perfectly infected. He is the moral anchor in a world of biological rot, and he is the reason the truth still has a chance to be heard. Part 17. Why Jill Matters. Now, returning to the front line after years of medical rehabilitation, Jill Valentine has become the ultimate symbol of agency in a world defined by biological enslavement. Her history with Albert Wesker and the P-30 gas is the most personal and visceral example of the loss of free will in the entire series. She has lived the internal hell of being a biological resource for a madman. Her body and mind turned into a laboratory for the development of the Ouroboros strain. This experience makes her the perfect counter to the Alliance's new bio-soldier program, as she understands exactly what it means to be a prisoner within your own flesh. Jill's return to active duty is an act of defiance against the very concept of the bioweapon. She is not just fighting a monster, she is fighting the technology of control. She has spent the last decade reclaiming her own neural pathways from the viral remnants in her blood. A journey of recovery that has given her an unparalleled understanding of the psychology of the reanimated. Jill matters now because she is the living proof that a human being can return from the hive mind and find their own voice again. She is the specialist in agency that the world desperately needs as the establishment moves toward obedience-based weaponry. Her presence in the next chapter will likely focus on the battle for the minds of the new bio-soldiers. While Chris wants to destroy them and Leon wants to manage them, Jill is the only one who might be able to save them. She knows that beneath the grey skin and the neural links, there is a human soul that is trapped in a state of permanent agony. Her mission is to find the frequency of their freedom, using her own history as a map to navigate the internal landscape of the biological slave. This makes her the most psychologically complex and empathic hero in the current world state. Jill also matters because she is the link to the original STARS unit and the initial mansion incident. She represents the first responders to the Umbrella disaster, the woman who saw the rot in its earlier stages and survived to tell the tale. Her longevity and her resilience make her a living legend whose authority cannot be questioned by the new establishment. She is the missing variable that the corporate architects failed to account for, the survivor who has already beaten their most advanced control protocols. Jill is the steady hand that will lead the resistance into the heart of the institutional evil. Furthermore, Jill's story deals with the theme of professional and personal recovery. She has had to rebuild her identity in a world that only sees her as a medical anomaly or a tactical asset. This struggle for selfhood is a core theme of the next mission, a reminder that the individual is more than just a genomic sequence or a data point. Jill's fight is for the right to be herself, a woman who is defined by her choices rather than her biology. She is the hero who has already fought the internal war and won, making her the ultimate guide for a humanity that is currently losing its mind to the hive. The next mission will likely force Jill to confront the remains of Wesker's research and the people who are currently refining it for the BSAA. This confrontation is deeply personal, a final reckoning with the man who tried to erase her. By destroying the technology of control, Jill can finally find the closure she has been denied for 15 years. She is not just fighting for a safer global society. She is fighting for the right of every individual to own their own thoughts and their own blood. She is the symbol of agency, and her presence is the only thing that can shatter the silence of the biological hive. Closing her current arc, Jill Valentine stands as the protector of human will. She is the woman who looked into the abyss and told it to move. Her story leading into Resident Evil 9 is the story of a predator who has reclaimed her own life and is ready to take it out on the people who tried to steal it. She is the missing variable, the one who knows that the only way to win the war is to give the power back to the individual. Jill is the heartbeat of the resistance, and she is finally ready to finish the war that started in the Arklay Mountains. Part 18. Why Chris might not be the hero. In the world leading directly into the final bill coming due, Chris Redfield stands as a tragic and deeply compromised figure, whose heroism is being overshadowed by his own complicity. For 20 years, Chris has authorized necessary evils in the name of global security, believing that he could fix the system from within. However, the discovery of the bio-soldier program has forced him to face the reality that he was a primary architect of the very nightmare he was trying to prevent. His rogue, radicalized state is an act of desperate penance, a scorched earth policy designed to erase the legacy of an organization that has turned his own bravery into a marketing tool. Chris's current path is one of violent, internal revolution, a mission that has stripped away the last of his professional morality. He is no longer the Boy Scout who believes in the rules of war. He is a vigilante who is willing to destroy everything and everyone in his path to achieve accountability. This radicalization makes him a potential antagonist, or at least a highly unstable variable in the next mission. His fury at the establishment is justified, but his methods are increasingly indistinguishable from the people he is hunting. Chris is the old soldier whose obsession with the truth has turned him into a tragic figure who might have to be stopped by his own friends. His history of authorized violence has created a legacy of blood that he can never fully outrun. Every mission he completed for the Alliance provided the genomic intelligence necessary to refine the bioweapons industry. He was the enforcer of a system that used his heroism to hide its own corruption. This realization has turned his life into a state of permanent psychological siege. He is fighting a war against his own shadow, trying to destroy the infrastructure that he helped build. This internal conflict makes him the most volatile character in the complete timeline, a man whose burden of command has finally broken him. The potential for Chris to become an antagonist is rooted in his belief that the system is infected beyond repair. He no longer believes in rescue. He only believes in erasure. This puts him in direct conflict with Leon and Jill, who still believe in the preservation of global society. Chris's willingness to risk a total biological collapse to bring down the BSAA is a dangerous and nihilistic gambit. He has become a man who is prepared to burn the world to save it, a hero who has been consumed by the very fire he was trying to put out. He is the requiem for the old guard in its most violent and tragic form. Furthermore, Chris's isolation has made him susceptible to the same ends justify the means logic that defined the Umbrella Corporation. He is utilizing black market networks and deniable tactical strikes that mirror the tactics of the connections. He has become a mirror of his own enemy, a warrior who has lost the ability to distinguish between a victory and a massacre. This moral decay is the central theme of his current arc. He is the hero who stayed in the fight too long. A man who has forgotten what he was originally fighting for in his desperate quest for vengeance. The next mission will likely force a confrontation between Chris and the rest of the survivors. They will be forced to choose between supporting his revolution and preventing him from triggering a global catastrophe. This choice is the final test of their bond. Chris is the tragic hero who has become a liability to the people he loves. A man whose guilt has turned him into a weapon of mass destruction. He is the symbol of complicity, the one who carries the final bill for 30 years of biological warfare on his own shoulders. Concluding this section, Chris Redfield represents the danger of staying in the abyss for too long. He is the man who looked into the heart of the corporate machine and realized that he was a gear. His story leading into Resident Evil 9 is the story of a man who is trying to stop being a weapon by becoming a bomb. Whether he is a hero or a villain is a matter of perspective. But he is undeniably a consequence of the world that Umbrella built. He is the final, tragic witness to the fact that in the age of institutional evil, there are no clean solutions and no easy heroes. The current verdict on the state of humanity is that we are no longer losing the war against the virus. We have simply adapted to it. The old world of biological safety is gone, replaced by a new normal, where biohazard tape and quarantine zones are as common as road construction. Global society has successfully integrated the presence of the pathogen into its daily routines, creating a culture of weaponized survival. Humanity has not been destroyed by the Umbrella legacy. It has been permanently edited by it. We are a species that has learned to live with the rot, turning a global catastrophe into a managed background noise. This adaptation is the ultimate success of the pharmaceutical myth. By convincing the public that the contagion is an unavoidable force of nature, the establishment has ensured that the status quo remains unchallenged. The people are not winning, but they are also not losing in a way that would trigger a systemic revolt. They are simply existing in a state of permanent emergency, accepting the loss of their freedom and their agency in exchange for the safety provided by the biodefense apparatus. Humanity has become a captured audience for the bioweapons industry, a world where survival is a proprietary technology that you must pay for every day. The state of humanity is defined by this loss of a biological free zone. There is no longer a place on Earth that has not been touched by the genetic runoff of the last 30 years. The water, the soil, and the air all carry the vestigial remains of the Arklay experiments. This environmental saturation means that the next generation of humans will be born into a world where their own DNA is already a field of study for the corporations. We are the children of the virus, a species that is being slowly rewritten by the very pathogens we were taught to fear. This is the reality beyond containment. A world where the infection is the new foundation of life. The international community has accepted this reality because it offers a new kind of social stability. By using biological surveillance and obedience-based weaponry, the state can manage populations with a level of precision that was previously impossible. The state of humanity is a state of controlled evolution, where the individual is a data point in a global experiment. We have traded our chaotic, unpredictable nature for the silence of the hive mind, convinced that this is the only way to survive the monsters in the shadows. We are a species that has chosen the leash over the abyss. Furthermore, the economic reality of weaponized survival ensures that this world state will never change. Entire global markets are built on the manufacture of the contagion and the cure. Choose to stop the cycle of infection would be to trigger a financial collapse that would destroy civilization more effectively than any plague. Humanity is trapped in a circular economy of biological terror, where every new outbreak is a catalyst for the next round of pharmaceutical profits. We are the consumers of our own demise, a species that has turned the apocalypse into a business model that is too profitable to quit. Ultimately, the state of humanity is one of institutionalized agony. We have learned to manage the pain and the loss, turning the tragedy of Raccoon City into a historical footnote. The heroes like Leon and Jill are fighting for a world that no longer wants to be saved. They are the ghosts of an old morality in a world that has moved on to a more clinical, biological logic. The state of humanity is the final victory of the umbrella ideology. A world that is perfectly infected and perfectly orderly. A species that has forgotten what it was like to be truly human. Concluding this verdict, the world beyond containment is a world of consequence. It is the final result of 30 years of ignoring the warning signs and prioritizing the market over the individual. Humanity has adapted to the rot, but in doing so, we have lost the very agency that made us human. We are the survivors of a world that ended long ago, living in the ruins of our own history, while we wait for the next genomic sequence to tell us who we are. It is the new normal, and it is a requiem for the species that used to be. Part 20. What Resident Evil 9 inherits. As we approach the final bill coming due, Resident Evil 9 inherits a broken world defined by corrupt institutions and weaponized survival. The heroes are older, their bodies and minds scarred by decades of biological warfare, and the organizations they once trusted have been revealed as the primary architects of the nightmare. The next mission does not inherit a world that can be saved with a single vaccine or a tactical strike. It inherits a systemic rot that has infected every layer of global society. The rules of the old world no longer apply, and the heroes are left to navigate a landscape where there are no clean solutions and no easy victories. The primary inheritance of the next chapter is the death of the institutional savior. The BSAA, the UN, and the federal government have all been compromised by the bioweapons industry, leaving the individual survivors to operate as rogue elements in a world that views them as liabilities. This inheritance shifts the tone of the series from survival horror to institutional resistance. The mission is no longer to help the authorities, it is to expose them. Resident Evil 9 is the story of the final struggle for the truth in a world that is addicted to the pharmaceutical myth. It is a legacy of betrayal and a quest for a final, visceral reckoning. The game also inherits a biological landscape that is more complex and unpredictable than ever before. The fungal network of the mold and the parasitic control of the Las Plagas have merged with the classic viral technology of the Umbrella era, creating a world where every creature is a unique, archived asset. This biodiversity of horror ensures that the player will face enemies that are not just lethal, but psychologically manipulative. What Resident Evil 9 inherits is a world where the monsters are smarter, faster, and more integrated into the environment than anything seen in the Arklay Mountains. The inheritance also includes the emotional baggage of 30 years of genetic warfare. The characters carry the weight of their complicity, their trauma, and their loss, making every action they take a desperate act of personal closure. This emotional core is what separates the modern era from the arcade roots of the series. The story is now a drama of consequence, a final stand for a generation of heroes who have realized they were fighting for a lie. The inheritance of Resident Evil 9 is the final bill for the pharmaceutical industry's ambition, and the survivors are the ones who have to pay it. Furthermore, the game inherits a public that is exhausted by biological news and desensitized to horror. The challenge for the narrative is to find a way to terrify a population that has already seen everything. This necessitates a move toward institutional and surveillance horror, a focus on the things you cannot see and the systems you cannot escape. The inheritance is a world of clinical blue lights and digital remains, a place where the nightmare is hidden in the fine print of a corporate contract. The horror is now institutional, and it is more lethal than any shambling corpse. The next chapter also inherits the legacy of the Winters family, a story that proved the human spirit could survive the total colonization of its biology. This hope is the only thing that keeps the resistance alive. Even in a broken world, the individual can still find the agency to fight back against the hive mind. This spark of rebellion is the most important part of the inheritance. It is the reason the truth still matters, and it is the reason the old guard refuses to stop fighting. Resident Evil 9 is the story of this spark being turned into a fire that could finally purge the legacy of Umbrella from the earth. Ultimately, what the next entry inherits is a final reckoning with the complete timeline. It is the moment where all the disparate threads of the Arklay murders, the Raccoon City collapse, and the global chaos finally come together to form a single, devastating truth. The world beyond containment is a world of consequence, and Resident Evil 9 is the story of those consequences coming home to roost. It is the end of an era and the birth of a new beginning, a requiem for the old world and a rebellion against the new one. The stage is set for the final bill to be paid. Final verdict, Resident Evil 9, is a consequence, not an escalation. The core theme of the next chapter is the final realization that the saga is not about a bigger monster. It is about the final bill coming due for 30 years of biological warfare. Resident Evil 9 is a consequence of the systemic rot that has been incubating since the first mansion leak. It is the story of a world that has finally reached the limit of its ability to manage the nightmare. The old rules of survival and containment no longer apply because the infection has become the foundation of global society. The game is a final reckoning with the pharmaceutical industry's ambition, a story that could only happen now, after 3 decades of institutional decay. This shift from escalation to consequence is what makes the next mission so vital for the complete timeline. We don't need a bigger bomb or a faster virus. We need a final answer to the question of human agency in a world of institutional evil. The story is a requiem for the heroism of the past, a realization that the war was not won in the streets, but lost in the boardrooms. Resident Evil 9 is the story of the heroes finally facing the reality of their own complicity and their own exhaustion. It is a mature, visceral exploration of the end of the old guard and the birth of a perfectly infected future. The consequence is the total loss of a biological free zone, a world where the individual is a proprietary asset of the biodefense apparatus. This is the final bill for the pharmaceutical myth. We have traded our souls for the safety of the laboratory, and now the lab is the only home we have left. Resident Evil 9 is the final act of a ghost who is ready to take back his life, a woman who has reclaimed her soul, and a soldier who is ready to burn the world to save it. It is the final stand for the right to be human in a world that has decided humanity is obsolete. The game is a consequence of the normalization of the nightmare, the moment where the public finally wakes up to find that the havens they built were actually cages. The final verdict is that the war is over and the monsters won long ago. We are just living in the aftermath of their victory, and the next mission is the final act of resistance against a future that has already been archived. It is a story of consequence, and it is the only way the saga could ever truly end. The bill is finally due, and it is being paid in blood and memory.